On a new sunny day, a girl arrives at the Nagumo Detective Agency, stands in front of the building, and smiles slightly. The events begin with hearing cheers and applause from some crowds, and we hear a journalist saying that the secondary detective did it again, meaning this detective was able to solve an old case that the police couldn't solve. We see two police officers taking a suspect into a police car, and they all get in and leave. We hear the journalist asking him about his opinion on this case, and here the young detective stands up, turns to her, looks at the camera, winks, and says that the case wasn't exciting enough, adding, "I was just kidding." We hear a telephone ringing in the background, which wakes up this detective from his sleep, and it becomes clear that everything we saw was just a dream in which he remembered events from his youth. We see that he's older than we saw him, and this is his painful present. He answers the phone on his desk and says, "Nagumo Detective Agency here." It becomes clear that the person in front of us is Kichiro Nagumo, who was a famous detective when he was young in the field of investigating cases, but he started losing his talent in solving cases over time. The person on the phone is the landlord demanding rent payment. Nagumo asks him to be patient for a few more days and apologizes. He says to himself, "I'm only one day late on the rent payment, and this cursed landlord is after me." Although at an earlier time, this landlord used to deeply respect Nagumo. Nagumo gets up from his chair and goes to his office door, but suddenly feels terrible pain in his spine and falls to the ground. But he resists and must move and get up because he has a surveillance mission he needs to attend to, as it's been a very long time since his last case. He needs to be fully focused because he has no chance to make any mistakes. He begins crawling on his stomach using his hands, encouraging himself to get up, and extends his hand to open the door. Suddenly, the door opens, and the girl we saw at the beginning of the episode stands in front of Nagumo, wearing a high school uniform. Nagumo looks at her, but his look wasn't innocent. It was a mischievous look. The girl notices this mischievous look and explodes with anger, pulling out a stick resembling a baseball bat and waving it in Nagumo's face, warning him not to look at her like that. Nagumo denies looking at her with such a mischievous look intentionally, but she doesn't believe him. Nagumo shouts at her and asks who she is anyway, and if she's a client, he's sorry he can't help her because he's busy at the moment. But she responds that she came to him because she saw this, and takes out a red box with a face on it. The girl looks puzzled and suddenly starts searching and taking out many things she was carrying. Nagumo is surprised by the number of things this girl is carrying. The girl says she seems to have forgotten this thing, but suddenly remembers she was keeping it behind her neck and takes out a paper and gives it to Nagumo. Nagumo reads the paper. It turns out to be the ad he made when he was short on employees at his company. The girl coughs here and says she's here applying for a job at his company, but Nagumo refuses to hire her, so the girl screams at him and objects to his rejection. Nagumo gets annoyed by her voice and asks how a high school girl could be a detective, objecting to her clothes and saying she's a made-up girl. The girl responds that she's not like that. She explains that this kind of thinking is very old and disgusting, but Nagumo doesn't care about what she says. The girl begs him and explains that working alone is difficult for him, and he must hire someone to help him with his work. Here, Nagumo takes out a cigarette pack, pulls out a cigarette, and lights it with his lighter. He looks at her and says that working as a detective is hard and difficult, and the detective must be steady, know no fear, and never let himself be tempted, and that it's a job that requires real talent. He looks at her and says it's not an easy job for a girl like her. Nagumo looks at her again with the same wicked and mischievous look. The girl notices it, gets angry, and shouts at him to stop looking at her like that, and takes out a spear she had with her and hits Nagumo with it. Nagumo apologizes to her. The girl tells him why he takes the opportunity every time to look at her with this wicked look. Nagumo also denies this and says it's not like that. The girl warns him and says it may not be so, but warns, "I practice karate, and if you do anything stupid, you'll lose your head." Nagumo is surprised by her words and tells her there are many part-time jobs. Why does she want to be a detective's assistant? The girl is surprised by Nagumo's words, smiles, and responds that she wants to be a detective. And here we hear Nagumo saying, "Is this something said by someone carrying a spear with them?" The girl explains here that she has worked hard and with great effort since she was young to become a detective someday, and even trained on the technique of storing all these items she carries with her. Nagumo objected to her words and told her that storing these things isn't even a skill, but the girl is convinced that she will be useful and begs him to agree to employ her. Nagumo barely speaks when suddenly he receives a blow from the girl on his nose, and she says there's no need to say that. Nagumo puts his hands on his nose, which is bleeding, and stands frustrated. The girl tells him that she is an ambitious detective, and guesses what Nagumo wanted to say. She puts her hand on her chin and thinks. Nagumo asks her if she can really do that. The girl looks at him and reassures him that she can, telling him that yesterday she watched all episodes of Furuhara at once, and puts one of her fingers in the middle of her head and thinks. Nagumo tells her this can't work. Then she tells him with a mischievous look that in the past period, he had few cases, so he's bankrupt now and can't hire new employees. Nagumo is shocked by her correct prediction, but he ignores her and leaves, telling her to bother someone else, which surprises her. Then we see Nagumo arriving at the station, holding a picture of a girl named Takako, 27 years old, who married the client who employed Nagumo about 2 years ago. The suspicion here is that Takako is having secret meetings during her working hours, which is why Nagumo was suspicious of her. Then Takako moves while Nagumo is watching her, and he follows her. Then we see Nagumo watching her as she walks in the opposite direction, thinking she's going to meet a man. We watch him carefully following her as she enters a cafe. He decides to go in after after her, but he's surprised to find it's an upscale cafe. He says to himself, how could a middle-aged man like him enter such a fancy cafe alone, and decides he'll watch Takako from outside. Suddenly, the young girl appears and grabs his arm. You'll definitely feel embarrassed if you enter this cafe alone. I suggest I go in with you pretending to be your younger girlfriend. Nagumo looks at her and is forced to agree. When Nagumo and the girl enter the cafe, the waitress asks them what they'd like to order. Nagumo looks at the menu but can't read it. Here the young girl steps in and orders a strange drink from the waitress. Nagumo shouts, that's too much. We see them sitting at a table near Takako. Nagumo looks at his drink and says he has sensitive teeth. The girl asks him what this means, so he tells her it doesn't matter, and asks her why she doesn't look for another detective agency that's hiring. The girl tells him his office is the closest one to her home. Here, Nagumo tells the girl he's been a detective for 20 years, and working as a detective isn't easy. The girl points out that he's here watching this woman, meaning Takako. Nagumo confirms this to her. The girl asks if it's about a love affair, so he answers yes, explaining that he's watching her closely because he expects she'll meet someone important. The girl is shocked by his obvious surveillance method. How can a skilled detective watch someone so obviously? This way they'll be exposed. Nagumo explains that he's gotten old and his eyesight has weakened, so what can he do? The girl yells at him and advises him to wear prescription glasses. Here, Takako hears them and looks at them. At this moment, the young girl realizes this and tells Nagumo that the woman suspects them. To avoid suspicion, the girl takes a piece of ice cream and puts it in Nagumo's mouth like lovers, but Nagumo protests that his teeth are sensitive. The girl insists so they can avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, we see Takako looking at them and muttering that if they're lovers, there's a big age gap between them. Here the girl looks at Takako and realizes her plan worked. Nagumo tells her not to get too nervous because Takako won't be able to expose them that easily. The girl looks angrily at Nagumo and tells him that without her presence, he'd be dead by now. Nagumo is puzzled by her words and asks her why. The girl continues explaining that these days with just a small smartphone you can send photos all over the world, so people have become more cautious than before and are afraid of anyone watching them. Nagumo looks at her meanwhile and asks what a smartphone is. The girl takes out her own phone and shows it to him, explaining that this is a smartphone, and asks him what he thought it was. Nagumo tells her he thought it was a hand mirror. The girl yells at him and tells him that if he considers himself a real detective, then he's old-fashioned. Nagumo holds the phone and looks at it and mutters that times have changed. The girl continues and tells him she was watching Nagumo while he was watching this woman, and explains that he's still chasing and watching people with food in his hand, and this is very old-fashioned. Nagumo is surprised that the girl was following him and asks her if she doesn't feel embarrassed following a middle-aged man. Nagumo doesn't know what high school is. The girl tells him she now realizes why he doesn't have many cases, because he's lost his ability. Nagumo agrees with her and tells her he's indeed lost his ability and his intuition has become weak, but all he knows are the old methods that brought him glory in the past, and they used to call him the Great Detective. The girl here believes Nagumo. Meanwhile, we see someone appear and stand next to Takako and start talking to her, then hugs her. Here Nagumo shouts that he was right. Proving adultery is easier than proving innocence. The girl suggests taking photos of them. Nagumo takes out a camera that's obvious to everyone, which angers the girl who tells him he's too obvious. Nagumo explains to her that this is all he has and doesn't know what to do. Takako and the man with her notice them then. The girl acts quickly and takes out her phone and takes a selfie with Nagumo. But when they go to the office, we see that the photo shows Takako and the man with her in the background. The man who hired Nagumo is shocked by his wife's betrayal. Then we see the man paying Nagumo and leaving. The girl asks Nagumo to let her be his assistant, but Nagumo refuses. The girl gets angry and explains to him that she helped him a lot. Nagumo tells her that's true, and so he'll give her a voucher to visit his agency anytime, and explains to her that it's too early for her to be his assistant. At this moment, the girl snatches Nagumo's jacket and tells him this is today's pay. Nagumo asks the girl how she feels about her first job. The girl tells him it lacks some excitement. Nagumo is surprised by her response. The girl explains she's just joking. Nagumo is more surprised and asks if she knows him. The girl leaves him and runs. Nagumo calls after her and tells her he doesn't know her name. The girl looks at him and tells him her name is Mashiro. Nagumo advises her to be careful as she walks. Suddenly, he feels back pain again and falls to the ground. Mashiro comes back to him again and tells him he's the one who should be careful while walking. On another morning in Nagumo's office, we see Nagumo and Mashiro screaming with cat photos in their hands saying, "No, this isn't the cat." In front of them, a lady tells them it's another cat. Nagumo indeed notices this and looks at Mashiro and asks her what they're doing with this cat. Mashiro suggests to him that this cat should become the agency's cat, Cerberus. Nagumo looks at Mashiro, who has decided to keep this cat, and approaches the cat's face, which spits on her. Mashiro gets very angry and starts mistreating the cat. Meanwhile, we see the lady in front of them asking about her request. After that, we see a poster written, "Any job accepted." Mashiro asks Nagumo his opinion about it, and explains that with this poster, many customers will come to them. Nagumo looks at the poster and then grabs it and tears it up. Mashiro yells at him and wants to understand understand why he did that. Nagumo looks at her and asks what she meant by any job accepted, and continues that they're detectives who don't know everything and have their pride as detectives. Mashiro looks at him and reminds him he was looking for a missing cat. Nagumo explains to her that finding a missing cat is detective work. Mashiro tells him that working as a detective these days is very hard to make a living, and they must accept all jobs like catching a bear that escaped to the city and things like that. Nagumo explains to her that he doesn't want to risk his life, and shouts at her asking how it makes sense to attract customers with this poster, and asks her to get rid of it. Mashiro explains to him that she distributed 500 posters around the city. Nagumo is shocked by her. He asked her how much it would cost to make 500 copies. He looked at the cat and asked if it wanted food, and he freaked out when he noticed the cat holding a fly in its mouth. Suddenly, the cat ran after Nagumo, who was scared of it. At that moment, Mashiro grabbed the cat, took the insect from its mouth, and advised it not to eat insects. Nagumo yelled at her and asked how she could hold an insect with her hands. Mashiro looked at him and explained that insects were nothing. Mashiro realized that Nagumo was afraid of insects, so she started approaching him, and suddenly, she ran after him holding the insect, with Nagumo running away scared. Suddenly, Nagumo turned towards Mashiro, grabbed her angrily, and threw her out the window, telling her to remove the 500 copies of the poster from around the city. A strange little girl appeared behind him, calling the police and reporting that a high school girl had been killed. Nagumo yelled at her, saying there was a misunderstanding. After that, Nagumo explained to the strange girl that Mashiro never minds falling from the 5th floor. He asked her why she was there. The girl explained that she saw the poster saying he accepted any job, which is why she came to him. Nagumo was surprised by the poster's success. The girl explained that she had a beehive at her house. Nagumo looked at her and asked her to keep what he was about to tell her a secret from everyone else. He explained to her that he was very afraid of insects and couldn't do anything himself, but there was a solution. He would call Mashiro to help her because she had no problem with insects. He grabbed his phone but asked the girl how it worked. The girl was puzzled. Meanwhile, Mashiro was removing posters when Nagumo called her and told her they had received a request for insect extermination. Mashiro was very happy, and Nagumo asked her to go by herself, so she asked him for the address. Nagumo then asked the girl for the address and gave it to Mashiro, who had already gone to the house. Nagumo asked her, "Do you see the nest?" Mashiro was standing in front of a Yakuza group's building, so she answered yes and told him, "It's a towering pest nest." Nagumo asked her to exterminate the entire nest. Mashiro yelled at him, "How can you talk so casually?" Nagumo asked her, "Why are you talking so weakly now?" He explained that he was relying on her for this. Mashiro promised him she would do her best. Mashiro started talking to herself, saying she had trained a lot and watched all action movies, and now she was like a secret agent. Then Nagumo asked her, "Are you ready?" She replied yes. Meanwhile, Nagumo was in his office, reading a book about insect extermination, and talking to Mashiro on the phone. He advised her to get as close to the nest as possible, and she must check the number of enemies at the entrance. At that moment, Mashiro entered an office with many people, who wondered, "Who is this girl?" Nagumo advised her to close the entrance, and Mashiro did so. One of them went to Mashiro, laughed in her face, and asked her what she was doing there. Nagumo advised her to spray the insecticide after blocking the entrance. At that moment, Mashiro sprayed the insecticide in the face of the man in front of her. The rest of the people freaked out and wondered, "What is this gas? Is it tear gas?" They prepared to take her down. Meanwhile, Nagumo was talking on the phone with Mashiro and told her that as soon as she sprayed the insecticide, they would go crazy. He advised her to be careful. The people started attacking Mashiro, and she dodged their blows and exchanged hits with them. At that moment, Nagumo advised her to beware of insect stings. Then someone pointed a gun at Mashiro and told her, "I'll turn you into a beehive." Nagumo was surprised to hear this familiar voice, and he heard gunshots. Mashiro was hiding from the gunshots and preparing to attack. She pulled out a strange weapon and shot at them. Nagumo was baffled and had no idea what was happening with Mashiro. Meanwhile, Mashiro took down all the people, and only one person remained, who was preparing to attack Mashiro. When Mashiro dropped her weapon, this person attacked her, but suddenly, he saw Mashiro as a warrior with a monster standing behind her. This person got scared, fell to the ground in front of Mashiro, apologized to her, and promised her that he would leave the Yakuza group forever. Then Mashiro informed Nagumo that the job was done. He had expected Mashiro to finish the job. The girl appeared very happy. Nagumo asked Mashiro, "Do you know what kind it was?" Mashiro didn't understand Nagumo's question, so Nagumo replied and told her, "Describe its appearance." Mashiro looked at the man in front of her and told Nagumo, "They have long legs." Nagumo was surprised and said, "Could it be a wasp?" Later, in Nagumo's office, Nagumo and Mashiro were watching the news reporting that the Yakuza group had been wiped out by an unknown person. Nagumo, shocked, asked Mashiro, "Was that you?" She answered yes. Nagumo yelled, "How did getting rid of a beehive turn into destroying a Yakuza gang?" Mashiro told him, "I made a mistake." She explained that she had brought someone else with her. This person turned out to be the last member of the Yakuza group, whom Mashiro had spared, and his name was Nizo. Nizo said that he was at Nagumo's service for anything he asked. Nagumo then asked him to make him some coffee. Mashiro was happy that their office had gained another member. Then a girl appeared from behind them and asked, "What about my request?" Nagumo and Mashiro are sitting watching a television program. Suddenly, they see something that terrifies them, and they start screaming. Mashiro goes to get salt to purify the place from evil spirits. Nagumo advises her not to watch such programs. Just then, Mashiro jumps up and throws the whole bag of salt at the television screen, breaking it. Nagumo says, "It would have been better if you'd thrown the salt without the bag." Mashiro is afraid of dark places and ghosts. She asks Nagumo if these things bother him. Nagumo answers, "No." Mashiro is surprised by his response and asks, "How so?" Nagumo explains that there's no such thing as ghosts. Mashiro asks him if he can walk alone at night in cemeteries. He says, "No problem." He continues, "Ghosts and Santa share the same roots, because they are products of children's imaginations." He adds that Santa, ghosts, and imaginary childhood friends are all illusions. Mashiro then thinks that if Nagumo dies, he will turn into a hateful trapped spirit. Just then, the doorbell rings. Mashiro opens the door to see Hayashida, who tells Mashiro that she really works at a detective agency. Mashiro is surprised. Nagumo realizes that Hayashida is Mashiro's classmate. Mashiro explains that she hasn't seen him in a while. Hayashida says yes, because she doesn't come to class often. Mashiro smiles and explains that she attends regularly. Mashiro gets flustered and asks Hayashida what his zodiac sign's fortune is today. Nagumo is surprised and says to himself that they aren't close friends. Hayashida explains that he came to ask for a favor. Mashiro tells him, "You're the one asking for the favor." Hayashida looks at them and explains that a ghost keeps appearing around his house. Mashiro stutters and gets scared. Hayashida continues, "Every night at midnight, he feels something outside, so he bought a surveillance camera to monitor this thing, and he saw static on the camera, and suddenly a girl's ghost appeared." He adds that he went out to confirm what he saw, but the camera showed static again, and the thing he saw disappeared. Nagumo explains that this could be a silly prank or a stalker. He continues that there could be many explanations for this, so he and Mashiro will investigate. He looks at Mashiro, who is trembling with fear. He imagines her as a crazy rural priestess. Suddenly, Mashiro replies, saying that she can't do this mission. Nagumo asks her, does a detective choose her clients based on her mood? He continues that he won't say that escaping to the easy path is wrong, but if she chooses this path, he will never follow her. Mashiro looks at him with surprise. We see the cat objecting, and a voiceover from the cat says that Nagumo made Mashiro take on the extermination mission alone. Mashiro then gets excited. Hayashida asks Mashiro if she's sure she'll be okay. Suddenly, Mashiro tries to recall her trainer's advice. Then we see her asking the trainer how to defeat a ghost. The trainer laughs and advises her to hit it in the nose. Mashiro says he made that up. The trainer replies that the weak point of any creature is its nose. Mashiro asks him if it doesn't work. The trainer replies that if it doesn't work, she should aim for the knees. Suddenly we see Mashiro saying she's ready. We hear Nagumo ask her, "Who is your trainer?" After that, Mashiro asks Hayashida that she didn't know he lived alone, and she sees his house is clean. Nagumo asks Hayashida if he wouldn't be able to see the ghost if he were outside. Hayashida explains to him that the ghost doesn't appear when people are around it, Nagumo thinks. At this moment, Mashiro looks at the laptop and says, "Is this connected to the surveillance camera?" Suddenly she screams that she sees something. They approach her to see what is appearing. Suddenly they see an old man passing in front of the camera. Mashiro says, "Just an old man." Nagumo yells at her and asks, "Is this old man famous?" We hear Mashiro say that he's the famous old man who's been appearing recently. How could Nagumo not know him, being old himself? At the same moment, we see Hayashida flustered and scared. Suddenly, he screams and says, "The static appeared." Suddenly, we see the girl's ghost screaming, and then Mashiro and Hayashida scream together, and Mashiro explains that this is the scariest thing she's ever seen. Nagumo asks her to go. Mashiro is surprised. Nagumo continues, "It seems to disappear quickly, and we need your speed to find out what it is." Here we see Mashiro angry and forced to go. Suddenly, she runs out of the house, telling Nagumo not to invite her to a barbecue later. Meanwhile, Hayashida says that the static is back again, and Nagumo and Hayashida look at the surveillance camera, and they see that the ghost has disappeared, and Mashiro appears. The next day, we see Mashiro getting ready and saying that this is the day she will catch the ghost. And the ghost appears on the surveillance screen, and Nagumo asks her to go chase it, and Mashiro goes quickly, and we see Mashiro outside screaming that the ghost has disappeared. On the fifth day, and we see Nagumo saying that it's there, and we see Mashiro running and jumping to catch up with the ghost. But the ghost disappears again, and Mashiro is disappointed. On the seventh day, Nagumo sits with Hayashida in front of the surveillance screen, and they watch Mashiro, who promises the ghost that she will break its legs so it can't run when she catches it. We see Nagumo explaining that Mashiro is getting faster each time, but it disappears before she reaches it, and it never appears if they hide and wait for it. Hayashida replies to him, saying that they are kind of stuck. Nagumo looks at him and tells him, "You seem very satisfied, all things considered." Hayashida gets flustered here and denies it. Nagumo warns him that the static has appeared. Suddenly, Nagumo calls Mashiro and asks her to go through the window this time. Hayashida is flustered, and Mashiro jumps through the window glass. doors, and she explains that the ghost won't expect her to take a shortcut this time. Hayashida is surprised. Nagumo notices that Mashiro is supposed to appear in front of the camera, but he only sees the ghost, and he looks at Hayashida and asks him, "What is this?" Hayashida replies that he has no idea. Nagumo explains that Hayashida is that ghost. Hayashida is surprised here and says to him, "I'm here?" Nagumo explains that Hayashida wore the ghost costume before and recorded these clips, and he was replaying the original image before Mashiro arrived, so that they wouldn't discover it was a recording. Hayashida is agitated and asks him, "Where's your proof?" Nagumo asks him not to be agitated, and explains to him that as soon as they looked at the camera, he was controlling the remote control in his pocket, and this is enough proof. Hayashida asks him when he found out. Nagumo replies, "From the first time, the moment the ghost disappeared, the light of the old man was visible." Hayashida asks him why he pretended not to know. Nagumo explains that he wanted to know the reason, and he discovered it in the previous days. And the reason is that he likes Mashiro, and he noticed his enjoyment of spending time with her, and from her facial expressions, ghosts were the last thing on her mind. So he created this story to have a reason to see her, and he asked him if he was right. Hayashida says no, and Nagumo continues that Nagumo had done it before, by borrowing an MD player from a girl and then telling her he lost it, so she would go to his room with him and look for it. But he later discovered that she had also stolen it, and he was shocked. Hayashida breaks down here and confesses that Nagumo is right, and that he indeed created this story for Mashiro, and he begs him for forgiveness, crying. Nagumo asks him, "Do you know Sherlock Holmes?" Hayashida answers him, "Yes." Nagumo continues that in one of the books, and he started thinking, and he said that he doesn't remember what was in one of the books. And Nagumo continues that Hayashida should stop stalling and tell Mashiro his feelings for her, and that he can pay his fees when he can. At this moment, Mashiro enters, and Nagumo explains to her that Hayashida wants to tell her something, but they are surprised that Mashiro has caught a real ghost, and both Nagumo and Hayashida are terrified, and Mashiro advises them to bring a bag of salt immediately. At the office, Mashiro doesn't find her pudding in the fridge. She goes to Nezukin, who's sweating profusely, and asks if he ate it. He nervously denies it, but then the news reports that Detective Nagumo has been arrested for stealing underwear. Mashiro doesn't believe it and tells him to find another lie, but she's shocked when she sees Nagumo's picture on the news, arrested for stealing underwear. At the police station, someone says, "You've grown up, Kichiro," Nagumo replies, "and you've gotten old too, Inspector General Mimasaka." The inspector asks him to address him as he used to. He remembers that he and Nagumo were brilliant detective partners in high school, but now, one is a humble civil servant, and the other is an underwear thief. Nagumo angrily tells him he's not the culprit. Mimasaka replies that he doesn't think he's the thief, so Nagumo asks to go home. But Mimasaka doesn't allow it because he has something, and pulls out an SD card. Nagumo asks what it is. Mimasaka says it's an SD card with footage recorded by one of the victims. Nagumo asks, "What's an SD card?" Mimasaka takes him to explain what's happening in the footage, but he breaks the card when inserting it into the computer, looks at Nagumo, and says, "I didn't do anything." After 10 minutes, he shows him a picture of Nagumo stealing underwear. Nagumo is surprised and says, "That's me." Mimasaka approaches him and explains that the case is closed, but Nagumo turns to him and says there's something wrong with the picture and that the person who looks like him is clearly looking at the camera. And based on the victim's statements that the thief is a professional, would a professional make such a mistake? He adds that someone wants to frame him, but Mimasaka isn't convinced and asks if he has proof. Nagumo replies that he will have proof, remembers Mashiro, and says his assistant will find the proof. Meanwhile, we see Mashiro holding a fishing rod with underwear at the end, asking Nezukin, "What's this?" He replies that it's an operation to catch the underwear thief, and that he'll carry this rod around the city to catch the thief. He asks her if this is what it takes to be a detective. Mashiro looks at him and says, "2 more." After that, we see Mashiro placing a map and pointing out the locations where the thief stole underwear. Nezukin notices that these locations are around their office. Mashiro replies that Nagumo was arrested, red-handed, and understands that there's photographic evidence. She explains that the thief looks exactly like Nagumo, and that the thief wanted to make it seem like Nagumo was the culprit. Nezukin smiles because he sees that Mashiro resembles a detective. Mashiro is pleased and asks him if he notices anything strange on the map. Nezukin asks what it is. Mashiro replies that if you draw lines connecting the locations, they form the Big Dipper constellation. Nezukin is astonished and says, "No way." Mashiro asks him, "How no way? It looks exactly like the Big Dipper." Nezukin replies that it looks like Uzbekistan and adds, "If it looks like the Big Dipper, what does that mean?" Mashiro explains to him that they must catch anyone wearing a Big Dipper costume. Nezukin replies that this is ridiculous. At the police station, Mimasaka can't believe Nagumo found a reliable assistant. Nagumo clarifies that he doesn't describe her as reliable. We see Nezoken upset with Mashiro and asking her why she's drying her underwear at his house. Mashiro explains that if she used the office, it would make the thief suspicious. She adds that people in this area are now drying their clothes indoors because of the thief, and he'll end up here. She also explains that the thief focuses on white clothes. While she's talking, Nezukin says, "Nagumo, they released you." Mashiro looks outside and tells him that she set a trap for the thief to come here. But she's surprised that it's not Nagumo, and it's the thief who looks exactly like Nagumo. The thief immediately escapes. Nezukin chases after him. While running, he bumps into an insect and falls to the ground. Mashiro sees this and swears that all the men in the office are useless. After that, we see Mashiro chasing the thief in the street. The thief looks at Mashiro and mocks her, but Mashiro replies that she'll use her drone weapon to stop him. The thief stops in astonishment, but Mashiro tackles him and says, "As if I own a drone, you idiot." She throws him to the ground and explains that she'll teach him a lesson for framing Nagumo. The thief asks her to calm down. Here, he slyly manages to escape from her while she's screaming in place. Nezukin comes and asks her, "Did you catch the thief?" But she gets angry and vows to crush him. We see that Mimasaka has finished questioning Nagumo. He asks him if his assistant will save him. They hear a noise outside, and Mimasaka asks about its source. Here, Mashiro opens the door and apologizes to Nagumo for the delay. Nagumo turns to her and says, "You're late." Mashiro smiles at him and explains that she caught the thief who looks exactly like him, but she hit him so hard that they can't distinguish his features. After that, we hear Mashiro say, "Stop there, arsonist." We see someone running, and Mashiro is behind him. This person wonders about Mashiro's immense speed. Mashiro pulls out a football and kicks it towards the arsonist. The arsonist smiles because the ball didn't hit him and mocks her, and suddenly the ball hits him. We hear Mashiro say, "The pen is mightier than the sword." Nagumo replies that this sentence has nothing to do with anything. At the police station, Mimasaka praises Mashiro for her work, and Mashiro explains that there's no need. But the arsonist laughs, and Nagumo asks him what's so funny. He says his art is outside and that they must go check parking lot number 1 next to the station, and he doesn't think they'll arrive in time. Nagumo asks Mashiro to go there quickly. Mimasaka asks him what he did. The arsonist answers that it's art. He continues, "Can the girl handle it?" We see Mashiro has arrived at the parking lot. We hear the person explain that his art is provocative. Mashiro searches the parking lot and sees a poster. We hear Nagumo ask her if she found anything. Mashiro explains that there's a monster hunt mission posted. She sees a box and asks what it is. Nagumo asks her to wait for backup and not touch anything. The arsonist replies that there's no time for backup. Mashiro is forced to open the box. We hear Nagumo ask her not to open it because it might be a bomb. Mashiro opens the box, and we find it's a bomb. The arsonist gets angry because Nagumo revealed the surprise. Mimasaka shouts at Nagumo for his indifference. He asks for the bomb squad to be prepared. Nagumo asks Mashiro to send him a picture of the bomb. Mashiro sends it to him. Nagumo and Mimasaka look at the picture. Nagumo shouts at Mashiro because she took a selfie with the bomb, because he wants a close-up picture of the bomb, but she sends him a personal picture of herself. Nagumo gets angry and tells her to stop. Mashiro then explains that there are 3 minutes left until the bomb explodes. Nagumo asks her to run away, but Mashiro refuses because if the bomb explodes, it will destroy the building. She adds that she will defuse it. Nagumo is startled and asks her to stay away from it. Meanwhile, the arsonist laughs at them, but Nagumo grabs him and asks him how to stop the bomb. Mimasaka explains to Nagumo that he told him nothing, and indeed, the arsonist says that there's no way to defuse the bomb. Nagumo lets him fall to the ground and asks Mashiro about her plan. Mashiro explains that she saw how heroes defuse bombs in movies, and if she can overcome this, she'll achieve a breakthrough, and if she fails, she'll achieve more than a breakthrough. Nagumo is worried about her words. She holds the bomb and says there's a blue wire and a red wire, and success is always in cutting the red wire. After that, Nagumo hears an explosion sound, but Mashiro reassures them and says it's her sound because she got scared. She asks what to do now because there's a tangled mass of wires. Nagumo asks her to run quickly, but she refuses and suggests that she will take it to a remote place where there are no people. Mimasaka tells Nagumo that the bomb squad won't arrive in time. Mashiro runs while carrying the bomb, and Mimasaka talks to her during this time. He tells her that there's an abandoned baseball field to the north. He adds that she must put the bomb inside the field. Mashiro runs, and there's only 1 minute left, and Mashiro couldn't put the bomb inside the field, so she's forced to kick it into the field, and she does. But we see Nezoken inside the field pursuing his photography hobby. He looks into the camera and sees the bomb in front of him. The bomb explodes and blows up the field. We hear Mashiro say, "Can you tell me how to get to the station?" And Nagumo replies that this sentence has nothing to do with anything. At Nagumo Detective Agency, we hear someone threatening Nagumo, saying it's time for him to pay his debt. We see anger in his eyes. We see Nagumo looking stressed at a late payment notice, and we understand he doesn't have the money to pay the rent. Mashiro overhears him and offers to lend him some money. Nagumo looks at her and asks how much she has. Mashiro replies that she has 500 yen in her piggy bank. Nagumo feels frustrated. Suddenly, the person we saw at the beginning of the episode appears behind Mashiro and asks, "Is this Nagumo Detective Agency?" Nagumo gets scared of him. Mashiro screams at him, accusing him of being a thief. But this person denies being a thief. So Mashiro asks him how he got in when the door was locked. This person replies that he has his special skills for opening doors. Mashiro is now sure he's a thief. The two argue. During this time, Nagumo feels his heart almost stopped because of this person. This person apologizes and says his name is Asunaro, a high school detective. He says that when he sees a mystery or a case, his nature makes him investigate it immediately. Mashiro angrily clarifies to him that opening doors and locks isn't a puzzle for him to solve. At this moment, Nagumo is surprised and asks Asunaro, "Are you really Asunaro the great detective? I see you on TV a lot." He adds that he's the best young detective in the spotlight right now. Asunaro replies that he has never reached Nagumo's level. Nagumo then asks him, "What brought you here?" Nagumo notices Asunaro is spaced out. It becomes clear to us that he's thinking 10 minutes have passed since he entered, and he hasn't been offered coffee. He wonders, what does this mean? Meanwhile, we hear Nagumo asking, "Where is our hospitality?" Mashiro then serves him coffee. We notice Asunaro thinking that most hosts serve coffee with milk and sugar on the side. He was served black coffee, even though he didn't ask for it that way. He wonders, what does this mean? Nagumo explains that this kid will be a source of trouble for them. After that, Asunaro explains that he came for one reason. He asks Nagumo to hire him as his assistant. Nagumo is surprised. Mashiro gets angry and clarifies that he already has an assistant. Nagumo asks him why a great detective like him wants to work for him. Asunaro replies that Nagumo is the reason he is who he is now, because when he was a child, he used to read articles about him, and how a young detective was able to defeat great editors with his intelligence and reach the top, and how all the media were interested in him at that time, and that he joined this field to be like him. And now he has become strong and ready to repay his debt to him. Nagumo appreciates his feelings but doesn't have the money to hire him. Asunaro surprises him by replying that he will work for him for free. He explains that his work is going well and he is wealthy now, and that he intends to pay his tuition fees. Nagumo is surprised and asks for clarification. At this moment, Mashiro screams and demands to participate in this conversation. She asks him if he shouldn't consult his first assistant. Mashiro, first. Here, Asunaro thinks and asks, "A gorilla wearing clothes and talking?" Mashiro clarifies that this kid makes her angry. She adds that Asunaro has no logic and suddenly broke into this place, and we hear Nagumo saying, "Without warning, too." Mashiro continues that desire isn't enough to be like this old man, referring to Nagumo. Asunaro asks her, "Do you think my admiration for him is all I offer?" He adds that he can be more useful to Nagumo than she can. Mashiro gets angry. We hear her reply that she is ready to face him. Asunaro accepts, but asks for another cup of coffee. We hear Mashiro say, "Right away." All this was watched by Nagumo silently. We then see a girl who says she's the host of the party. We understand she's Kazamaki, Asunaro's assistant. She adds that they will compete in 3 basic areas for detective work: intelligence, deduction skills, and endurance. She clarifies that whoever wins the first 2 areas will become Detective Nagumo's assistant. She asks, "Is this acceptable?" Asunaro quickly replies, "Of course. No problem." Mashiro screams here and clarifies that it's unfair for Asunaro's assistant to set this up. Kazamaki looks at her, saying there's no need to worry because she hates Asunaro. We hear Asunaro say that this is painful and she's harsh on him. Kazamaki replies that she wants extra pay for it. Asunaro clarifies that she's speaking proudly, but she's deeply in love with him. Mashiro asks her, "Is that true?" We see her holding her nose. Asunaro tells her to stop that. We hear Kazamaki say that the first round is intelligence. We see Nagumo sitting and watching them at this moment. Kazamaki adds that each competitor will be given the same wire puzzle, and whoever untangles it first will win. She continues, "Are you both ready?" We see Asunaro and Mashiro with the puzzle. Ready. The competition begins. We see each of them trying to untangle the wires first. Kazamaki clarifies that Detective Asunaro is very fast. Asunaro laughs and explains that he's close to untangling it. At this moment, he's shocked when he sees that Mashiro has untangled it before him. Asunaro screams when he notices that she cut the wire. Kazamaki announces that Mashiro won win. Asunaro is surprised and asks how she allows that. Kazumaki explains to him that she said whoever untangles it first would win. Asunaro here accuses Mashiro of cheating and refuses to accept this. We hear the saying, man is unwilling to believe what he does not understand. Pascal. Asunaro gets angry at Mashiro. The result is Mashiro's win. Nagumo puts his hand on his face. We hear Kazumaki say that the second round will be on deduction skills. We see a coded phrase created by Kazumaki. She adds that whoever discovers what's written first will win. She asks them to get ready. The two start thinking. Nagumo asks, do we need to be outside for this? Mashiro thinks, what is written? Is the first letter in English, or are they drawings? Asunaro at this moment clarifies that this is very easy. Mashiro is surprised. Asunaro adds that what's written is the word bye. Kazumaki here apologizes and declares Asunaro the winner. Mashiro gets angry and clarifies that this was too fast. She accuses Asunaro of knowing the answer. We hear the saying, those who study 3, 4, or 5 times more than anyone else are geniuses. Noguchi. The result is a tie now. Asunaro asks Mashiro, do you even know the word bye? Mashiro gets very angry and accuses him of trying to start a fight with her. Kazumaki interrupts them, saying that the final round is endurance. She shows them a drawing. Kazumaki explains that it's called a stamp collection race. She tells them she placed stamps in 3 locations around the park, and whoever returns here first will win. Asunaro provokes Mashiro, saying that he will help her find her next job. Mashiro gets angry. Kazumaki asks them, are you ready? She pulls out a cap gun and fires it, but they collide like sumo wrestlers. Kazumaki here clarifies that if they don't take this seriously, she will leave. Then we see them running side by side, and Asunaro says to Mashiro, how dare you collide with me like sumo wrestlers, you cowardly muscle girl. Mashiro replies that he's the coward. Meanwhile, Kazumaki turns to Nagumo and feels sorry that he's forced to put up with this nonsense. Nagumo replies to her, it's alright. Kazumaki says that Asunaro admires him greatly, and all his talk is about him. Nagumo replies that Asunaro has strange taste. Kazumaki clarifies that Asunaro wants Nagumo to regain his former glory, and his desire for that is what brought him this far. Meanwhile, Asunaro and Mashiro approach the first stamp location. Nagumo asks, is his sparkle dull now? Kazumaki quickly apologizes here, but Nagumo was joking with her. He adds that Asunaro reminds him of himself when he was young, and he bets he's enjoying this stage. We see Asunaro and Mashiro approaching the third stamp location during this time. Nagumo continues that Asunaro has no doubt that he can continue like this, and that he is different from him because he has support. Because when he was his age, there was no one to support him except his partner, who pushed him forward or reined him in when needed. He adds that he envies him, because talking with a partner, your age seems easier. Kazumaki is surprised and repeats, your age? She adds that she still deserves to stay for a while. Nagumo asks her, did you say something? Kazumaki answers, no. She asks Nagumo, is Mashiro his support now? Nagumo replies that he's not sure. Kazumaki smiles and clarifies that they're a good duo. She asks him that if Asunaro wins, not to fire Mashiro. Nagumo looks at her and clarifies that no one can defeat Mashiro in endurance. Kazumaki looks and clarifies that anything she says to praise Asunaro, she regrets. We see that Asunaro is ahead of Mashiro. He provokes her by saying that she's about to lose the race. Mashiro feels her body getting heavy, and if she loses, she won't be able to stay with Nagumo. We see her throwing away everything that weighs her down. Asunaro is surprised by the amount of things Mashiro was carrying. Kazumaki is also surprised. Nagumo explains that it's her storage technique. Mashiro finally got rid of everything that weighed her down. Suddenly, she takes off at an enormous speed. Meanwhile, we see Mashiro's coach talking to her. He clarifies that she trained well and endured all this tough training. Mashiro asks him, can I become a detective? The coach answers, of course. Suddenly, we see Mashiro won the race. Asunaro clarifies that he lost, but he will take her place next time. Mashiro replies to him, okay. Asunaro thinks here and wonders. In a situation like this, the other party should reply and say, you did well. What does this mean? We hear Mashiro say that he's a very annoying person. Asunaro calls out to Kazumaki for them to leave. Nagumo clarifies to him that she already left, because she said she had to pick up a package. Suddenly, we see Asunaro running and calling Kazumaki's name. Nagumo clarifies that he didn't do anything, but he feels exhausted. Mashiro asks him, is he okay with this? Because if he had hired Asunaro, he would have paid him money, and he would have become a better assistant than her. But at this moment, Nagumo interrupts her, and asks her why she has become an adult and sensitive person. He adds that if she brings him a lot more money than him, what's the problem? He asks her, can you do that? Mashiro looks at him and replies, yes. Nagumo is broke. Mashiro clarifies to him that she can lend him some money. Asunaro appears again from behind Mashiro, and Mashiro gets startled again. She asks him, what are you doing here? Asunaro replies that he's here for work. Kazumaki interrupts him and clarifies that it's about the commotion that happened last time, and she gave them a gift. Nagumo says there's no need for that. Asunaro clarifies that Kazumaki interrupted his conversation, and that he's here to ask Nagumo to do a job for him, but no one paid attention to his words. Asunaro thinks, is he actually dead? Mashiro clarifies that she went too far with the joke. Nagumo asks Asunaro if he has a job for him. Asunaro explains that he has a stalker. Nagumo and Mashiro are surprised. Asunaro continues, saying he always feels like someone is watching him, and whenever he tries to chase this person, he can't catch them because they're too fast. Kazumaki explains that Asunaro is very popular and has some extreme fans. Nagumo accepts the job, wanting some excitement. Later, on the street, Mashiro remarks that a three-way chase sounds fun. Nagumo tells her it's not a game. Kazumaki notices Asunaro has stopped. Nagumo sees that Asunaro is staring at a person wearing glasses, thinking he's the stalker. Asunaro thinks to himself that the person doesn't look like they're training, so why are they wearing headphones for running? Nagumo remarks that this is a rude first impression. Kazumaki replies that Asunaro thinks he should be asking questions all the time. Mashiro notices him stop again. We see Asunaro thinking that a woman is filling her car with cat supplies, even though her husband has a dog-like face. Nagumo wonders if he has to do this all the time. Mashiro comments that she couldn't live with him. Suddenly, a group of fangirls is standing around Asunaro. Nagumo asks Mashiro if she noticed anything. She asks what? Nagumo replies that he noticed someone has been following him the whole time. We see a person wearing a mask. Mashiro says they look suspicious. Nagumo clarifies that while that person is indeed suspicious, he's talking about the second person. We see a person with their face covered. Mashiro replies that they are indeed strange. Nagumo tells Asunaro to calmly head in the direction he points him to. We see Asunaro walking with this person behind him. Suddenly, Asunaro confronts him, surprising him by calling him a fool and saying he's cornered. He asks him why he's following him. The person explains that he didn't mean to. Asunaro says that the worst stalkers don't realize they're doing it. The person denies it and runs. Asunaro smiles and says, "Didn't I tell you you're cornered?" Nagumo suddenly appears in front of him. Nagumo asks him, "Are you saying you're tougher than a bear?" He explains that this was a long time ago and that he was previously asked to get rid of a destructive bear. The stalker looks at him and runs. Nagumo suddenly bends his ankle in a weird way and falls to the ground. He yells at Mashiro to catch him. Mashiro appears in front of the stalker with a strange pose. The stalker tricks her, making her look in the other direction, and escapes. Nagumo wonders how the stalker knew about the celebrity Mashiro likes. He calls for Kazumaki to go after him. Suddenly, she throws her cloak at him. Finally, they catch the stalker. Asunaro asks to see his face. They are shocked when they see it's Nizu. Mashiro asks him, "Why you?" Nizu replies that he's not a stalker. Mashiro asks him why he ran. Nizu answers that they looked so serious that he got scared and ran. He points at Asunaro and says he is the stalker. Asunaro is surprised and asks who he's stalking. Nizu replies that he's stalking Nagumo. He continues, saying he saw him hanging around and watching the agency more than once over the past month. Whenever Nagumo would leave, he would follow him. Kazumaki asks Asunaro what this means. Asunaro explains that it's a mistake, and that he was watching Nagumo to wait for the right moment to introduce himself. He had to figure out his life patterns. He asks them who would call that stalking. They all answer him, "We call that stalking." Kazumaki gets angry, and Asunaro gets scared of her. She tells him she'll hear his excuses later. Asunaro runs, and Mashiro asks Nizu to chase him. Nagumo says that the worst stalkers don't realize they're doing it. Remembering Asunaro, we hear him say, "I guess they're right.